you go. You're going to see a lot of white oak. That's the wood you're going to see everywhere. White oak in here. And that staircase is one of my favorites. I think that's really beautiful. Nice staircase.
Oh.
All right then, this is the library. And before we start walking through the house and looking at the features, I'm going to finish the story of Gene Stratton Porter's life, and I'm going to use photographs in this cabinet. See, I'll get around where you can see pictures here when I open it up. We've already got to the point where Gene's living here in this house. Let's talk about what happened afterwards. After living here 18 years, which is longer than she ever lived in any other house in her life, she then bought, with money she earned from selling books, she bought 120 acres. Window seats are okay if y'all, if anybody does want to sit. That is okay, the window seats. So thank you for being observant, but it is okay. All right. So Gene spent her wealth and bought 120 acres on the shore of Sylvan Lake up there by Rome City and built a second larger version of this place she called a Limberlost Cabin North at Wildflower Woods. And she moved up there in early 1914, and that's a picture of Limberlost Cabin North at Wildflower Woods. Now, she didn't live there all that long. She only lived there about 5 or 6 years, and not even year-round. Sometimes it's called her summer home. And then she decided to go live in California. And the main reason for that move was her health. I think a lot of us know by now that 100 years ago, they had a pandemic also, only theirs was the Spanish flu. And Gene got really sick with it, was in the hospital for like a month. So after she got out, her doctor recommended staying away from cold weather. And in those days especially, Indiana winters were really cold. They're not so bad these days, but then they were. So she decided to go live where the climate was milder and where she had some relatives living. And that would be Los Angeles. Just starting in 1920, she was so rich from selling millions of books that she could do all these things. She bought a house for herself in Los Angeles. She bought her daughter a house in Los Angeles. She started her own movie production company, Gene Stratton Porter Productions. And that was to turn her books into movies. She was one of the first women to ever start a movie company. Then she built, she called it her summer home out in California on Catalina Island off the coast of Los Angeles. And her little summer home was 14 rooms, had 3 big halls in it. It was bigger than this place. And that was her retreat, her getaway. But it was small compared to her main California residence, which she built in a new Los Angeles neighborhood that started the year before she built her home there. It started in 1923. She built a home there in 1924. And this is a name many people recognize, Bel Air, right? Really rich people live in the Bel Air neighborhood in Los Angeles. Like the Fresh Prince of Bel Air. Y'all ever heard that TV show, right? Well, that's where that takes place. Now, Gene's home in Bel Air, I got to show you all this picture. I'm going to carry it around so you can see it up close because this is impressive. This is her Bel Air. I shouldn't say home, I should say mansion, right? She says, yeah, that is a mansion. Yeah. Gene was one of the richest women in the country by this time. Yep. And she could afford to build a house like this.
Cool.
Cool, there you go. That's right, it is cool. It's got some English architecture to it. Gene really was into her English ancestry on her father's side. Now, I hate to do this to you, but I got to tell you something very sad about the mansion. Gene never lived in it. She was going to move into it in the middle of December of 1924. And just a few weeks before she expected to make that move, on December 6, 1924, she was killed in a car accident in Los Angeles. Her chauffeured vehicle was struck by a streetcar. Y'all know what streetcars are? Big electric trains in cities like they still got them in San Francisco and New Orleans, where I lived all those years. So her car was struck by a streetcar. She was killed. A few hours later, died in the hospital, and she was only 61. Now that sounds really old to you guys, but really 61 is not that old, believe me. Yeah, Gene could have lived another 20 or 25 years, so she was in a way cut down in her prime. Now the good news about the mansion there is her daughter Jeanette got to live there with her family for about 10 years. First, Jeanette married one of the oil guys who came here for the oil boom. And that wedding took place in this room right here, 1909. Then they had 2 daughters and lived in Pennsylvania, but Jeanette divorced him, moved out to California with their 2 daughters to be with Gene, and out there Jeanette married the director of Gene's movies, and they had 2 sons. So that combined family lived in that mansion for about 10 years. So that's the good news. And Gene's husband, Charles, she went up to Rome City, and he stayed here in Geneva during the week, and he'd go up there on the weekends. She went out to California, he stayed here in Indiana, went out there in the winter. But he was going to move into that mansion and live out the rest of his life with her, but after her death, he did not move out there to live with his daughter. He stayed in Indiana, and he died 2 years after she did, in 1926, up in Fort Wayne at his physician brother's home. He had a brother named Dr. Miles Porter, a very famous physician, actually. So that's the story of their family. Now, in Jean's lifetime, the 21 years that she was alive and selling books, she sold about 10 million around the world. For that time period, that's astonishing. Nowadays, a single book can sell 10 million, but we have a lot more people in the world now than there were then. So that is really amazing. And she was on the top 10 U.S. bestseller list 7 different years with 6 different books. So she had a number 9 bestseller, a number 8 bestseller, 2 number 5 bestsellers, 3 number 3 bestsellers, and in 1912, the year the Titanic sank. You ever hear of a boat called Titanic? You all know about that? Yeah? Big ship went down. Well, that year, the number 1 best-selling fiction book in the United States was The Harvester by Gene Stratton Porter, and she wrote it here in this room. So she was a publishing phenomenon. She was a photography phenomenon. There's pictures right there of a vulture chick that she took as it grew up in the swamp. That had never been done before. And Gene was a mother with a camera. So what do mothers do when there's kids around and cameras? What do mothers do?
Watch.
They do watch, but what else do they do with their cameras? They take pictures. Do you agree? Take pictures? She's like, yeah. Well, guess what? Jean was a mother with a camera, so she took pictures. I'm going to show you all a picture Jean took of her daughter, right here in front of this fireplace. Look at that. That's about 1899 or 1900. Yeah. There's Jeanette. And look, that golden eagle right there in that picture is the same bird you see right there.
But not in glass.
Not in glass. Very good. That's exactly right. And this great blue heron is...
Not in the glass.
Yeah, not in the glass either, but this is not the same bird as that one. It's a different bird. The house had 7 gas fireplaces in it when it was built. 5 downstairs and 2 upstairs. And Jean's husband Charles had a museum quality collection of Indian artifacts. And several dozen things you see up there did belong to him. They are original. Not everything, but many things up there were his. See that flask right there? See that? Mm-hmm. Do you see that anywhere up there? You see that? There you go. It is right there. Same flask. Exactly. Now, Jeanette was an only child. Didn't have brothers and sisters like you guys have, brothers and sisters to play with. So, Jeanette had to use her imagination sometimes, and she had a tea party one day over there in that dining room, and she invited 2 guests to come to this tea party. And I'm going to show you a picture Jean took of the tea party with the 2 guests. So I want you all to look at this and tell me if you recognize these 2 guests at the tea party. So let's see. Take a close look. You have to look at this one a little more closely. What do you all think? Do you recognize those? Yeah, she's smiling. Do you? Who are they? Who are these 2 people at the tea party? Or not people. I can't say people. They're animals. What animals? There you go. She got it. In this picture, that eagle that you see there and there, that eagle is right there, all wrapped up with a shawl and a scarf. And the heron, which is not that one, the heron is there with a bonnet on its head and a bow on its neck. So she invited the birds to come.
Because that was taller than that.
Yeah, that was taller than that one. Yeah, you're right. Very good. You guys are very observant. I like that. All right, I'm going to leave those there. Normally turn around. It's the last tour of the day, and some of y'all want to take a closer look as we walk by. All right, now that desk there did not belong to Jean. She had a desk in that spot, shaped like that, not as big as that one. She never owned that one, but she knew the man who did own it. And Jean and this fella, whose name was Booth Tarkington, were part of what's called the golden age of Hoosier literature. In the late 1800s, the early 1900s, for about roughly 50-year period, the only state that had more famous or popular authors than Indiana was New York. We were a very famous state for writers back in those days, like Gene Stratton Porter, Booth Tarkington, who won the Pulitzer Prize for Literature twice, Lew Wallace, who wrote Ben-Hur, everybody's heard of Ben-Hur, and James Wickham Riley, a famous poet. They were all part of that group back in those days. And Booth Tarkington lived in Indianapolis, but he had a summer home in Kennebunkport, Maine. And this is his summer home writing desk. So it's kind of nice, even though we don't have Gene's desk, we can talk about the golden age of Hoosier literature and have a desk from a very famous fellow. Now this desk design is called a partner's desk. See how we got chairs on each side of it? You can sit on each side of it and you can kind of work back and forth, right? If you want to dictate a letter or something like that. You know what else is pretty cool about this partner's desk? I'm going to ask you to step that way for a moment. I'm going to demonstrate something. See, I got a drawer on this side of my desk, right? I can pull out my drawer and check it out. But guess what I can do with it? I can stick it out there. same drawer, right?
Yeah.
So I could write a note to you and I can pass it to you and clean it out after. So that's one of the features of the partner's desk is a shared drawer. So it keeps him running around, doesn't it? All right. This is the original chandelier that was in the house when Gene lived here. It was gas, of course. It had a valve on the side. You could run a hose down there and have a nice gas lamp on your desk, which is a pretty cool feature. And I want to mention that structurally, this house is almost exactly like it was when the Porters lived here. All the floors, all the doors, all the walls, all the trim, all the ceilings except this one. Everything else I mentioned is original. That's the only false ceiling in the house. For structural reasons, they put it there, but it looks exactly like the original. So as I say, if you walked in this house when the Porters lived here, the furnishings, of course, would be somewhat different, but the glass cabinets, all that stuff would be here just like you see it now. And one last thing before we leave this room, here's one of Gene Stratton Porter's nature books, Ma's of the Limberlost. She used her own nature photographs in her nature books with a few rare exceptions. It's a moth, almost a butterfly, very close.
That looks like a butterfly.
Well, butterflies and moths look a lot alike, actually. Yeah. Now, when you look at these pictures in this book, they're color, and yet color photography had not been invented yet. So how did she do that? She took some of her own black and white photographs, like that caterpillar, and she hand painted them herself with watercolors to have pictures. So when she sent this book to the publisher, she had 22 color pictures in there she had painted herself. So she was also an artist. So she was a very multi-talented lady. All right, let's go into the music room then. Well, it's not a piano. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Just hang on. We'll talk about it. I got to hear. Apparently not. It was widespread. They lived in this house. I guess so. As long as he's on it.